The movie's opening scene is in 1954, Boston Harbor Islands. Edward, Teddy, Daniels, and Chuck Aule are tasked to investigate a patient named Rachel Solando, who has escaped the day before from Shutter Island, a federal mental hospital for the criminally insane. Teddy is on a ferry with his new partner Chuck, heading to Shutter Island. While they're chatting, Chuck asks him if he has a girl or if he's married. Teddy then reveals that his wife died in the smoke of an apartment fire while he was at work. They finally land on the island and are greeted by the deputy warden McPherson, while the other police officers are staring at them on their way into the island. When they arrive inside the mental facility, McPherson gives them a tour explaining the different housing places for the patients. There being Ward A, B, and C, Ward C is the most dangerous of them all and is forbidden to enter without the permission of the warden and Dr. Aule, a psychiatrist, who is the head of the institution. They are then ordered to surrender their firearms before entering the facility. Afterwards, they go on to see the head psychiatrist, Dr. Aule, to get a briefing about Rachel Solando. Aule explains that Rachel is in the mental facility because she killed her 3 children by drowning them in the lake behind her house. Teddy then suddenly gets a brief flashback about people frozen dead and gets dizzy, and Aule gives him some aspirin. After that, Aule further goes on to tell them that she's a war widow, and after she got in this facility, she still thinks that her children are alive and believe this place is her home, with her considering the workers as delivery men, milkmen, and postal workers, and seeing the patients as her neighbors. The marshals then check her room to find any clues, and Teddy finds a note saying the rule of 4, who is 67. Then, the marshals instruct that they need access to the personnel files of all the medical staff, to which Aule replies he will forward his request, and in the meantime, let him interview the staff who were around the time of Rachel's disappearance. Afterwards, they join the search with McPherson to ask him some questions along the way, and soon start questioning the medical staff. Shortly after, he discovers that Rachel's primary psychiatrist, Dr. Sheehan, has left for a vacation. Teddy insists they talk to Dr. Sheehan, and they try to make a call, but the storm prevents them from reaching him. After that, they go to Aule's colleague, Dr. Jeremiah. Upon meeting the doctor, he continues to get flashbacks from his time in the Second World War as a soldier. Teddy once again requests for the personnel files, but Nehring declines, causing him to get furious. Teddy then states the investigation is over, and they're leaving with the ferry the next morning. While sleeping, Teddy gets a vision of his wife, Dolores, while in their apartment. She tells him he has to face the fact that she's not here anymore before turning into ashes as he wakes up. The morning arrives, and due to the heavy rain and harsh storm, Teddy and Chuck aren't able to leave, so they decide to continue the investigation. They ask Dr. Aule if Rachel was receiving any other treatments for her illness, and Aule reveals that they have been giving her a combination of drugs meant to keep her from becoming violent, and the greatest obstacle to her recovery was her refusal to face what she had done. And they continue to interview people who were in the therapy group discussion with Rachel. Mrs. Kern, one of the patients being interviewed, is rather calm and seems normal compared to the others. She doesn't give him much information until she asks Chuck to bring her a glass of water, then writes something in Teddy's notebook when no one sees. Teddy then asks her if she knows Andrew Ladis, and she nervously says no and leaves. After that, Teddy says to Chuck that they've all been coached to say the same thing, including Aule and the nurse. Chuck then asks why he kept questioning them about Andrew Ladis. Then Teddy tells him Ladis was the maintenance man in the apartment building where he and his wife lived, and that he was the one to light the match that caused the fire to kill his wife. Teddy says Ladis got away with it and disappeared, and a year later burned down a schoolhouse, killing 2 people. He then got transferred here from prison, but also vanished again with no records. It's raining heavily, and the marshals go to a secluded cemetery. Then Teddy reveals what Mrs. Kern wrote in his notebook, which says, "Run." The weather worsens and trees start falling down, causing them to stay for a while in a cabin in the woods. Teddy talks about the time he served in the Second World War. Teddy's unit was the one that first encountered the concentration camp, Dachau, where he saw the dead bodies frozen with a woman and her daughter in her arms. A German commander tried to commit suicide by shooting himself, but survives, and Teddy kicks the gun away so that he bleeds to death. Teddy admits he and his comrades killed dozens of Nazi soldiers, even though they surrendered, raining bullets on them. He says it wasn't warfare, but murder. Teddy reveals that he did research on Shutter Island before coming here, saying that they are experimenting on the patients' minds. Momentarily, Officer McPherson finds them and takes them back to the building where they changed from their wet clothes into the white uniform of the orderlies. Teddy and Chuck sneak into a doctor's meeting about the harsh weather conditions that could lead to flooding in the Ward C section. Upon hearing the doctor speak about there being 24 patients being in Ward C, while 42 in Wards A and B, Teddy interrupts by suggesting the sum of the patients equals to 66, and that Rachel is pointing there is a 67th patient, as it says on the note. But Dr. Cawley informs him that Rachel has been found. Confused, they go to Rachel's room and ask her where she was the previous day. She tells them first she made breakfast for husband Jim and sent her kids to school, and after that, she had thought of Teddy, saying that he's Jim, her husband. She hugs Teddy, sobbing, and insists that she buried him. Afterwards, Teddy gets a severe migraine and face starts looking pale. Cawley gives him some more aspirin to stop the pain and get him down to a bed to rest. At that time, he sees the warden looking at him sort of like he hates him, then falls asleep. In his dream, Teddy sees Laeddis in Crawley's chair. Laeddis has a scar running from his right eye down to the left side of his chin. In another, Rachel now replaces the frozen dead Hebrew, and her daughter asks Teddy why he didn't save her. In another, she has killed all her kids and is asking Teddy to get rid of them. His wife then appears and tells him that Laeddis is still on Shutter Island. The next day, the backup generators failed, and all of the patients' cell doors were therefore opened. Teddy and Chuck get into Building C. Teddy finds George Noyce. He tells Teddy that the only way he can save Noyce is to forget his wife and Laeddis. Noyce tells him that Laeddis is no longer in C Building, but that they have taken him to the lighthouse, where they are planning to do a lobotomy on him. Teddy wants to go to the lighthouse, and Chuck dissuades him. Teddy goes anyway and finds the tide has cut off the lighthouse from the mainland. He finds a cave with a woman inside claiming to be Rachel. She says she was a doctor and resisted the lobotomy that helped patients forget their past and their pain. She warns Teddy to stop taking food, pills, and cigarettes from the hospital, and says that he will be committed by being declared insane because he was asking too many questions about what was going on at Shutter. Teddy can't find Chuck, and Crawley tries to convince him that he came to the island alone. His wife appears again and implores him not to go to the lighthouse, saying if he goes, it will be his end. Teddy blows up Crawley's car as a distraction and sneaks into the lighthouse to rescue Chuck, whom he thinks has been kidnapped for mind experiments, checking each room but finding no operating rooms for surgical experiments. He finds Crawley inside, who has his gun, which Teddy checked in. Crawley tells Teddy that he has been a patient of Shutter for 24 months and that the hospital has been doing a role play to get him to finally realize the truth. He calls in Dr. Sheehan, who turns out to be Chuck. Chuck is the primary psychiatrist of Teddy and agrees to play along with Teddy's fantasy in order to keep tabs on him. Dr. Cawley shows him a whiteboard with 4 names, the rule of 4 from the notebook, and tells Teddy that his real name is Andrew Laeddis and Edward Daniels is an anagram. The same with Rachel Solando and Dolores Chanel, his wife, thus stating that he is the 67th patient. Crawley says Teddy has created this alternate reality to escape from his crime that he cannot admit. He also says that Teddy hurt orderlies and Noyce 2 weeks ago, and now the board of directors have voted to lobotomize Teddy unless he gives up his violence immediately. That's why Crawley constructed the roleplay, to prove the impossibility of Teddy's notions of conspiracy and to make him accept the truth. His wife Dolores was a manic depressive, and Teddy ignored everyone's advice. She burnt down his apartment, and he moved to a lake house where she drowned his kids. Teddy shot and killed her, hence the reason he is in the mental facility. Moments later, Teddy wakes up in a bed, and Crawley asks him a series of questions to see if he recovered from his breakdown. Teddy then admits that he blames himself for not realizing earlier that his wife was having trouble, that he feels responsible for the death of his kids because he didn't get his wife help when she needed it. He created a fantasy world where he never killed his wife, and he never had kids. The next morning, Teddy talks to Dr. Sheehan as Chuck about getting off the island, showing that he has regressed again. Dr. Sheehan then signals Cawley that it didn't work out, but this time it's different. It seems Teddy realizes his mental state and knows he couldn't bear to accept the truth, which would be worse, to live as a monster or to die as a good man, and gets up to accept his fate by going voluntarily to the lighthouse for the lobotomy. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our video. Watch the next recaps on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.